Yeah. But anyway, we're going to talk to Billy from Texas, wanting to talk about humans are able to make simulated universes. And I'm really curious about this. Billy, what kind of give us your elevator pitch? I like how Christy said it before. Your 30-second elevator pitch about what you want to talk about today.
Hey, how's it going? I saw the first caller, and with the first caller, you said that the argument that we only have one universe, and so we don't know if they're if the if the force characteristics or cosmological constants were different, then we could possibly have a different universe or something like this. So there's no reason to think that fine tuning is a good argument or whatever. But the thing is we do have multiple. I mean, we only have one universe that we can experience, obviously, but we do have multiple universes. We do have many, many rolls of the dice that we do all the time. Even Einstein used to create simulated universes almost 100 years ago. That's how they determined that fine-tuning, that the universe is fine-tuned, and that if those characteristics were different, that the universe, in most cases, the universe itself would not exist, not just life wouldn't exist.
So Billy,
yeah, that's my argument.
Those are like, yeah, so we have some simulations, right? But those are theoretical, right? We don't have those universes in reality that we know of, correct?
I mean, obviously, we don't know of multiple, like, physical universes.
So,
correct.
When you run into the post hoc problem as well, like the
yes.
fact that we're looking at it from this side of the event. But please, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is that, like, we can theorize a lot of things, but there's a big difference between theory and actual experimentation and actual evidence, right? Like, I can think something in my brain and I can do a logic, but just because I did a logic doesn't mean that that logic is going to play out that same way in reality. Because again, there are a lot of variables that we might not know about yet. And so if I say, yeah, I'm accounting for all the variables that I know about, and maybe I give some leeway for some unexpecteds, but either way, we're not going to be able to test those in reality to verify whether or not it's true. And that's why theory kind of, like, at least this kind of theory just kind of stays in theory until we can find a way to really demonstrate that. So that's why when I say, like, we cannot statistically, like, actually prove this, we don't have a way to. We have an n=1, and even if we have a theoretical alternative, it's theoretical, and we see this even. I use medicine frequently as examples because that's my field. So, like, we've had different hypotheses over and over throughout, like, the history of medicine. And I can guess, like, oh, I think that this particular medication is going to be good for this person because I understand this physiological process to a certain extent, and this is what I can guess it's going to do. There have been so many times where we've tried things like that, and we've gotten a different outcome than what we expected because we just didn't know something. And so if I made decisions in medicine based only on theory and not based on experimental evidence, I could potentially hurt somebody, right? And so, like, there's a danger into relying on theory and making decisions based on theory alone because we have all of those variables. And that's, like, so I think I like to throw on the phrase, like, it's mental masturbation to an extent, because it's like, it's fun, it's great. Like, I enjoy having those discussions, but then there becomes kind of a problem when we take this and say, I'm going to make decisions for myself and other people based on just this theory, right? And depending on what the theory is too, like, there might be differences in the degrees of consequences. But that's kind of my pushback, is that this is all theoretical. So I don't think it's a good reason to then say that the fine-tuning argument is a good argument.
Well, I think that's the reason. That's the reason why we use simulations to do these, to evaluate this, because obviously we can't experiment. We cannot create universes and in physical reality. So we have to do it using supercomputers, like like illustrious TNG 300, whenever we created that simulation, and we used, because we have a lot of information about the variables, we know a lot of information.
We know a lot, but do we know, are there variables, Billy, are there variables that we wouldn't know about? No, Billy, because I'm not going to let you keep smuggling in points. We're going to address the points as they come, because otherwise we start assuming that what you said was correct and you're able to just go off of those assumptions. And I don't want to go off of those assumptions. So even with a supercomputer or anything else, there is still data that cannot be accounted for with that, right? Because there are things that we don't know. Right.
But we can make simulations that we can make simulations that match what we see in reality right now using
to
the
an
variables
extent
that we know.
To an extent.
No. The illustrious
right?
TNG 300 almost identically matches with what we see in reality.
To an extent, that from what we see in reality, right?
Really,
We don't know everything in reality, right? We don't. So is there still room for error in these simulations?
we know enough to know that
we know enough. You're saying we know enough about the universe to not have error in our simulations.
Well, we
know
know
all models are wrong. You know, all models are wrong. Some are useful.
Physics. We know enough about physics to know that if certain force characteristics are different by a small amount, then the universe itself would not exist. So, it
would not necessarily. I'm going to push back on that. It may not exist in the way that we currently experience reality. There are certain things, like there are a lot of variables. If we changed, we might get a result that we just didn't know was possible. And this isn't saying that I believe in those universes. I'm in the camp of we don't know what the possibilities are. We don't have a way to actually determine the probability. We can make guesses, we can make theories, but that's not.
We've been doing it for 100 years, though. I mean, you don't think that we've.
But you think? Do you think, Billy? Do you think that the things that we know now are going to be the exact same things that we consider to be true, like 100 years from now, or even 1,000 years from now? Do you think our science is so good right now that it's not going to be corrected in the future?
I mean, I don't go about. I can't go on future knowledge because I mean.
Right, we don't know. The most honest thing you can say right now is to say we don't know. Right.
Right. But there are things that we do know. You do believe that there are things that we do know, though, right?
Yeah,
there are things that we are confident.
Point.
There are things that we are confident in.
Yeah, and we also don't know how many attempts, quote unquote, there were at the creation of a universe. And even that word creation is really problematic. There is a singularity that exists that we cannot look past right now. And to suggest otherwise is just using God as some excuse to fill in all of the gaps. Again, this idea of post hoc rationalization comes up where we say, well, the universe exists. And as far as we can tell, in order for a universe to exist, it has to have these components. So therefore, God, it doesn't work out that way. You don't know how many possibilities there were for all of this to happen. And to suggest that it proves anything is a little off point.
Well, there are two other possible or possibilities. One is the eternal inflation, and then the crunch down effect, which is where, like, if gravity was too strong by one part,
these are all hypothetical.
The universe would. Well, no.
These are all hypothetical. We don't have realistic evidence that these are happening. We have theory and we have hypothetical situations. But it sounds like you are like taking these hypotheticals and then considering them to be just as good as like experimental reality.
I mean, it's the best we can do. So we can't make
but the best we can do does not mean that it's sufficient to prove the point, right?
So do you think that these simulated models have any value at all?
I think they have some value. I don't think they have the value you're giving them. I think that it's a step to learn about things. And I do think that theory is a good way to start asking questions. Like, I think that there is value to theoretical questions and theoretical models.
Okay.
There's definitely value, but the problem is when you're saying that the value is greater than it actually is, and that's what I'm pushing back on, because I think theory gets you to the point of asking the question and figuring out how we could demonstrate it in reality. But until you make that step to actually demonstrate it in reality, we're limited in what conclusions we can draw from it. And that's what my pushback is. And I'm a little bit curious, Billy, like what is your background?
So until we can make universes in reality, then you don't believe that any experimental data that we create, in supercomputers and stuff like that.
I think if we could make experiments, and if we could make a convincing experiment, I might change my mind. But the problem is everything you've mentioned is theoretical. So, and I don't know what it would take to convince me that we have enough evidence. But if someone brought that evidence, I might be willing to change my mind. But Billy, what is your educational background on this particular field?
I don't want to talk about me. I'd rather talk about my argument.
No, I'm curious. Like, are you a physicist? Like, are you in some branch of science? Like, what is your education on this?
I prefer to stick to my argument and not talk about me personally. I think that's
it matters.
Your argument seems to lack any sort of credentialing.
Yeah.
It seems to lack any sort of sophisticated understanding of these models that we're discussing. You point out that these models have been around for 100 years. So what? I'm unimpressed by all of this, and I think that to continue to say, I'm not trying to mischaracterize what you're saying. But what you are saying is that these models prove, and that feels really weak.
Well, I mean, they come up, they present conclusions. They present hypothetical.
They present discussions. And when someone writes a paper and they have a conclusion section of their paper, that isn't necessarily saying that they actually provided a whole lot of evidence. Like they might claim in their conclusion that is what happened, and that's a different story. But just saying that a study has a conclusion written in it doesn't mean that they actually concluded that there's evidence for X, Y, or Z. And like what Christy is saying, the reason why I'm asking you about your background is like I think the level of confidence you have in certain things is not the level of confidence that many scientists would have, and I think a lot of scientists approach these issues with more caution, and there's a reason why you get a lot of conservative language in studies of saying, like, under these very specific circumstances, this might be something that happens, or this might be related, this might be a correlation, this might have a causal relationship. Like, there's very rarely are they going to say that they are like 90-something% confident that this is a causal relationship. Like it tends to be a lot more conservative in how confident they are in these claims. And so that's why, like, and I see this a lot with lay people, especially will take in information and kind of misread what the data is saying and misread what the discussion is happening. A lot of times it's trying to lead to more study to be done on this. So
can I ask, how did you determine my confidence level in my argument?
Based on what you said,
why are you saying that I seem so extremely confident? Like, I think my confidence
because you made,
I don't know, 85,
because Billy, you made the argument that we've studied this for 100 years, and that the supercomputers are like as close to reality as we can get, and then therefore we can make these big conclusions. Like you've said,
you compared them to like actually having a universe. You said we have these simulated universes.
Okay, well, that's the argument.
Okay, go back and listen to the beginning of the call.
That is the argument you made.
Find the point where you actually proved anything.
What I said was that illustrious TNG 300 matches with what we see in reality. When they run that simulation, it does match with what we see in reality. So I didn't say that that's as good as we can get, but it does match with what we see in reality. If you can look it up.
So what was your point? So what was your point in bringing that up then?
Well, I mean, in that part of the conversation, we were talking about, the precision of these simulations. So, and they're pretty good.
Right, and you displayed a lot of confidence that the simulations could accurately account for variables in reality that would make you convinced that the universe is fine-tuned. Yeah, we plug in the variables that we account for, but there are plenty of variables that we don't account for. And so that was my point. And it seemed like your level of confidence is higher than mine.
Wait, how do you know that? How do you know that?
Because there's always variables that we can't account for. There's always variables we can't account for. And so this is, again, Billy, this is why I think that, this is why I tend to think that you don't have as much foundation in this, because it's extremely overly confident and inaccurate with reality to say that we've accounted for all variables.
Wait, but you're just saying that there are always variables that we're accounting for. How do you know that?
Yeah, I am saying that.
That we. Yeah, I mean,
but the nature of models, that's why it's a simulation rather than an actual
because
experiment.
We don't know everything, and the computers that we build don't know everything. We cannot know everything. There are very few things that I will make an absolute statement about, but that is one that we do not know everything.
We know enough to make simulations that closely.
And again, simulations are not actual reality. They are theoretical, and I think we're not getting anywhere with this call. So I think we're
right.
Yeah, I mean, these simulations are pretty good, Ben. Like, don't put words in his mouth. He's not confident in them. They're just pretty good. I don't know what to do with any of this. The fine-tuning model is well debunked.
Yeah.
You guys have a good day. It was very nice talking to you guys. I appreciate the conversation.